my photos. So
here we are for Mission of Hope again in the boardroom at Seton Catholic Central School in Plattsburgh. The lost lambs have returned from Nicaragua. They're back again. We've spent several sessions in this room, and I've always been inspired when I come here, and I love to do things that inspire me. Sister Debbie Blow, you're back. You look like you might have even had several nights' sleep.
yeah, well, it's been about almost 2 weeks since we returned, so we've had a chance to get some sleep and recover from the flying and recover from the change of diet while we were down there and the lack of water and the different things that we experienced. No hot showers. We experimented with Nicaraguan food while we were down there.
I heard a few of those stories.
It settled better with some than with others.
I heard that too.
I have to say, I was really proud of the students because they were at least willing to try it. You know, I think in some ways more than I was, but it was. We've had a chance to recover. I know that the students are still chatting about it at lunch oftentimes each day, or all of a sudden a youngster will get teary at home and not quite be able to explain why, or because it's hard to explain to someone who hasn't been there, and yet they need to find words to express their experience. And so hopefully with the group that we have here this morning, you'll get a variety of some of the images put into words of what they experienced while they were in Nicaragua.
I should mention to our viewers, and Calvin has very clever ways of projecting it on the screen, that we're recording this on the 10th day. Is this the 10th day of March, 2000? And it seems like you spent so long anticipating this trip, and then it seemed like you came back the day before you left, and now it's hard for me to believe that 2 weeks have gone by since you got home. Time plays nasty tricks on us sometimes.
We actually, believe it or not, actually started planning for Mission of Hope 2 shortly after we returned last February. People continued to send donations. People were inspired and their hearts were touched. The push really began in September with the students. They went through a long process of application and procedures and enculturation meetings and planning meetings and fundraising meetings and sponsorship meetings and all those things, and getting all the things they needed to be complete. So there was like a lot of work, and then the packing and the shipping of supplies from September to February. And I don't know, I would let them speak for themselves, but for me it was like we were there and then all of a sudden it was time to come home. And I think if any of us had been told that our flight had been delayed for a day or two, we probably would have handled that just fine.
Already people are telling us they want to go next year, and people who went with you this year want to go again, and we're going to have to charter a whole fleet.
We're going to need Air Force One, I think.
To do it again. I mean, we were well informed back home, thanks to Shan Moore, our good friend Shan Moore in the Press Republican, thanks to the video that got back to Channel 5. We were happy with those pictures and those scenes and the little tidbits we get. And I want to know about the tarantula. Was there a little spider story that should be told?
I don't know. They probably have a totally different perspective than I do, but I am not good with spiders at all. And then
seem to get that message.
Offer me a tarantula about this size, and we actually have pictures of it, and I'm even worse. But the funny part of the whole thing, apparently, from some perspectives, was that my good gentleman didn't want to kill it. Oh, they were just going to let it loose outside the compound. And I said, no, you are killing it. And no, we'll just let it loose outside the compound, sister. Really, really. And so I said, you ask Sister Mayello, who was the principal there. And Sister Mayella said, no, you have to kill it. You have to kill it, you know. So a pretty funny scene ensued shortly after that, because the 2 gentlemen or 3 gentlemen that had it in a drinking cup of all things. But anyway, they dropped the tarantula onto the tarmac, and one of them had a cement block ready to kill it, but it took off. So I'm screaming, kill it, kill it. And doesn't it take off between, there was like a cement slab and like a step before you went into the church, and there was a hole, and it crawled behind there at first. I was frantic because I thought, we'll never get that thing out. Anyway, one of the gentlemen grabbed a stick and shoved it behind the thing, and I'm on the other side watching it, and doesn't this thing come crawling out this way toward me? Well, my killets got a little louder, and They thought it was kind of funny that a nun was screaming, "Kill it, kill it." But anyway, it took them about six shots with a cement slab, and they finally squashed the thing, you know? It's like...
I'm glad there were no other injuries.
No.
I wish we had that whole incident on
no
tape.
other injuries, but it really was funny. We have precious pictures of tarantulas and cups, and I believe we found a couple of barn spiders in the showers one time, didn't we? Ladies or gentlemen, and we had a wonderful flying cockroach in the room where Sister Stephanie and I and one of the other sisters. I'm not kidding. No exaggeration. That cockroach had to be at least 1.5 to 2 inches. In fact, I didn't know what it was because I had never seen anything that large. But Mrs. Flores kindly informed me that that's what it was. So I wasn't afraid of it until she told me what it was.
I thought we were more afraid of the unknown.
Yeah.
Listen, there are other things. I just want to get a general story before we start talking with the young people who made the trip, and it's always great for me to do that. We read in the paper that you had a problem with supplies when you first got there. What was that all about?
Yeah, well, we had such a tremendous response on the part of North Country people that we actually had over 8,000 pounds of supplies. We were limited to taking with us on the charter around 4,000. So with the generous donation of mold-right plastics paying half the bill and people making contributions, we air-shipped the other 4,000 pounds. What happened was the agreement that we had with the shipping company, it was supposed to go door to door, which meant directly to Chiquilistagua, to the compound. Unfortunately, it got held up at customs in a warehouse there. And so the second day, some of us, Phil Maynard was one of the, who else was, of the students that are here, Phil was with us that day when we began to try to track down our supplies. And it literally took us, Mr. Flores and I actually went, these are, now remember, these are materials we've paid for, they are materials we've shipped, we've paid $3,900 to get them there. And we were actually sent at one point, he and I, to 7 different offices. And you'd have to go here and explain, then here and explain, and here and explain. Anyway, finally, and I really have to say I'm very grateful because I think part of the clarification of the issues happened as a result of one of the MAI graduates, Mr. Yanez, who did a letter for us to the customs officials, and he's one of the members of the government down there. And I think once we were able to present that letter, we actually got our supplies back. But there was a little bit of sadness in the fact that when we actually got our supplies, we learned some things, and I think it helped us to even be a bit more compassionate. At first, we were really upset because it was obvious that some of our boxes had been tampered with and things were missing, and they were really, some of them, things had been spilled in them and stuff like that. But then we learned through waiting for a long period of time on the dock, literally on the dock of the customs, waiting for a truck to come so that we could load. I had all my kids there to help load, and Mr. Flores informed us that the gentlemen who are working in this dock area are not paid. They are not paid. They're simply told by the officials, if you want to come and move boxes and load trucks, you can do that, and what you get paid is what people are willing to tip you. Well, when you think about the fact that there's 60% unemployment, okay, and these men have families and children, we weren't missing things like computers or expensive things in our boxes. What we actually realized what we were missing were things like baby food, baby medicine, baby supplies, some regular food. And suddenly for me it clicked. I was no longer angry because when you are desperate and when you have a family to support and you have young children and you're not being paid but you're being asked to work in case you might get a tip, I'm not saying that's where the supplies disappeared, but if that is where the supplies disappeared, I can live with that, and I can be at peace with that, because I really believe that the supplies, and perhaps this is my hope as well, that the supplies went to feed children, that these men were desperate and needed to feed their families. So, you know, at first we were a little upset. Like I said, now I can be at peace with that. And we did get all 100 boxes. Some things were missing, but not significant things. And we got the materials back to the school compound and began to get them distributed to the local people there.
Before we start to go around the table, and we'll be doing that, I want to just get some of your instant reflections. Now let's make some instant oatmeal from Nicaragua, pour the hot water on it, and come up with some of the things that were significant. I mean, they some of them can be heavy, some of them can be humorous.
Well, as if I did an image of my days there, I felt like I was being tugged in 75 different directions, because we increased our group by 25 additional people. That made the demand significant. So I felt that we had more people, we had more work, we had more accomplished. Another image I had is I had no more than walked into the compound that day, and a 27-day-old baby was brought to me. And it was like everything from last year flashed back in front of me. The baby's stomach was swollen, and his eyes had stuff in them, and you could tell the baby was hungry. And yet our clinic hadn't opened yet, so we had to deal with that. I have to say that for me, one of the lasting images is just how I am so proud of my students. I get a little emotional when I think about what they did and what they were willing to sacrifice, and how their lives were touched that week, and building 4 homes and taking care of 900 people in a clinic, most of whom had never been to the doctors before, and carrying bags of stuff out to the families, and students meeting their sponsored younger brothers or sisters for the first time, or opening a wheelchair and having one of my students lift the woman into a wheelchair, and then our taking her home and realize she wheels that wheelchair almost 3 miles one way a day on the road and in the dirt to get to where she needs to go to try to work. Those images, visiting the woman for adoption, the adoption general of the country, I felt honored to do that. I also felt that she was really very forthright with us. I felt that there was a genuine motherly concern on her part to be honest, and she appreciated our genuine concern about the families in this country who want to pursue adoptions. So I felt really good about that. I was saddened, deeply saddened, and angered when we drove by the sweatshop and learned that just a few months prior to that, many of the young women and people who worked in that sweatshop had basically been poisoned through the ventilation system so they could downsize. And
oh, wow, that's a story we heard, and I have to tell you, I was affected deeply by it.
I can't even tell you how angry I was, and there are stories that you hear, and yet, unfortunately, my kids really struggled with that, because they said, yet these companies are the companies we buy our clothes from. But what are we supposed to do, sister? There's no other place to buy our clothes from back in the States. And there's a piece of that's true. But the upside to that is, the North Country put 131 kids in school. That's 131 kids that won't be in a sweatshop, So there's upsides to all the downsides of the experience. One of my favorite images is when we went out to do a home visit. Sister Stephanie handed cereal bars to this little tiny tyke, and we have a picture, and she was a little over a year old, and she literally was prancing around hugging her box of cereal bars like somebody had just given her paradise. And that was a very powerful image that lasts with me. But I don't know how to explain growing with the kids, learning from my kids.
It wasn't just more of the same. There's so much to do there from what I get from you and from the other people who went there. There's so much to do that this year was completely different from last year.
Well, you can plan, but once you get there, anyone who thinks it's easy to plan this kind of trip, or people say, well, you can do this, you should have done this, you should have done this. The reality is we had been planning for a year with Mr. and Mrs. Flores, who are natives of Nicaragua, and even with all of that, many of our plans unfolded very differently than we had expected when we got there. But I also think that's God's way of saying, here, this is what needs to be done today, and this is what I'm putting before you this day. And as I put this before you, let's see how you're going to handle it. And so it was very different. I think it's also very different because I did take different students, And for me, that's an enriching experience to share that with them. That's something no one will ever take away from us. You know, I tease them and I say, you know, 30 years from now when you're pushing me around in my wheelchair, we'll always have something special to share that we shared. And there were times when they weren't happy with me during the week when I told them no on things and challenged their insights on things. And there were times that they said, hey, sister, relax, smile for a minute, you know. So, I mean, it was for me, I just really believe that I'm not better than them and they're not less than me, that we're in this together and we learn from each other. And I think any teacher or any person in responsibility that forgets that has forgotten one of the most precious pieces of wisdom of working with high schoolers. I treasure working with these kids. To me, it's been a blessing.
Let me ask you a question before we start again. Are there any other schools in the United States that do this in Nicaragua, or are you unique?
No, we learned actually while we were down there. There was a small, I believe it was on the plane. We were learning that there was a much smaller contingent, and that is a piece that we really have to look at for next year. Very honestly, is manageability. We may need to do like adult groups at different times and keep the student group with a small group of adults to the February break, just because of manageability. But no, we're not the only group. There was a group of students from Canada, a small group, that were going down, but they were working in another location. And then while we happened to be in the city on Sunday going to the market, we stopped to eat before we did that, I ran into a woman from Oregon who has been down there as part of a church group for a year and a half doing ministry. And we've also learned that the American school in the city of Nicaragua, where obviously the upper echelon kids go to school, they themselves in some respect try to assist the others. We're not the only ones, but I'm glad we're not the only ones, because I think it was said very well by the Viewpoint in the Press Republican. You know, there's a sense sometimes of thinking that, God, what did we accomplish? It's like, you know, you do, and there's still like more to do. But the reality is that if it was only a drop in the bucket, it was worth every speck of the drop of water that we did. Because the goal is to change who we are here. Not just to bring something there, but to bring home something in each of our hearts that will help us to somehow view the world differently, to look at our choices differently. I can't tell you how many of my students have said, you know, I went to the mall and I decided I didn't really need that. Or
that's the same story we got last year.
I've had 3 different students say that to me that I can think of right off the top of my head since we've come back, that they had a chance to go to the mall, they got there and said, I don't really need to spend money on this. Or one student, he said his mother was going to the mall, and then he said, she asked me what I wanted or something, and he said, I don't need anything. And he said, I think probably before I would have said, bring me this, this, or this. And so I think choices are different. Now, granted, they have to live in this culture, they have to survive in this school, they have to be a part of American society like we all are, but it's who we are, but who we are differently. I think that's a piece of it. How have our hearts opened more? How have we become more tolerant? How have we become more understanding? You know, I will dare to bet, even unfortunately in the North Country, you can hear things like, oh, send those immigrants back to the country they came from. You know, that kind of attitude, because they're threatening our jobs and our positions and those kinds of things. I think you would be hard-pressed to find one of these students who would say that now, because they see the desperation of why people want to come to the United States, the desperate poverty situations, and why the United States does look like the land of dreams and opportunity, because in fact it is. It is not a fair playing field in this world, and we are one of the richest countries of the world. But fortunately, here in the North Country, with the students and the people that we have throughout the entire North Country, this mission has just grown to a point that, you know, it's like the seed was planted last year. This year it's been watered. And it's been watered with lots of sacrifices, lots of prayers, lots of hard work. So I just think it's going to continue to grow, because I really believe it's of God.
Well, it has to be.
Yeah.
How could it help it? Let's
Meanwhile,
begin our little tour around
Yes.
the table. Everybody has been so patient trying to think, oh my gosh, what am I going to say when he puts that microphone in front of my face?
They're probably saying, now, Sister Debbie, you said enough. Let's go.
But what I'm going to do is just walk around and try to talk to everybody, to get names, and then we'll get everybody's experiences. But I'd like to have other people speak up if something that one person says, another person says, oh yeah, but I was there and, you know, somebody did that. So let's just make it that kind of around the table thing, and I'll just skip past you and let us begin. Who are you?
Kara Boyven.
All right. What was it like for you?
When I first got there, it was just a shock to see, like, you'd see these really big houses, and then literally right next door were these little tiny shacks, and there were so many people living in them, and it was just hard to believe that, wow, you know, it was just overwhelming.
Somebody told me that there were houses, I can't tell you, they were telling me there were houses made of garbage. Mm-hmm. There were houses made with the only thing on the outside were garbage bags. I mean, this is hard for us to conceive of here.
When I went to the garbage dump on our way to the market, it was so unbelievable. And it almost made me feel bad that I was taking these pictures. But when I took them, I wanted to show people back here that these people literally, they live in garbage. And it was so unbelievable that they eat and they sleep and they do all this stuff in the garbage dump.
In the garbage dump, they live and they struggle and fight over whatever they can get to eat and use.
Mm-hmm. It just, I don't know, it made you think completely different when we came back here and you go to the landfill or whatever and to take a look at it and to realize back there they sleep in there. I don't know, it was just hard to believe.
That was one of the big surprises. Anything else that was different from what you had been led to believe before you got there?
I don't think there was anything really different, but I had to experience it for myself, that the kindness these people showed towards you, and that they just were glad that you were there, and that the little kids would come up to you and just give you hugs and try to talk to you, and you were just like, okay. I mean, it was just a lot of kindness there, and it was really nice.
And don't you wish you could bring them all back with you?
Yeah.
Were you actually involved in what activities did you do?
I went to the orphanage, and one day I worked in the dental clinic, and I was involved in building a home and unpacking supplies and bringing supplies to the homes around us.
That's terrific. All right, we'll talk to you more. As we mentioned different things here, and if you come up with a photograph, just flip the book open and Calvin will take a picture of the photograph as we talk of different things. I'm just going to kneel next to you. Hi, who are you?
Jessica Bracero.
Jessica, was it an interesting experience for you?
Yes, it was. No matter how many stories you hear about Nicaragua, once you go there and experience it for yourself, it's a totally different view when you come back.
And everybody sees it from a slightly different perspective, right? Your stories are different from her stories. What things impressed you most?
I think things that impressed me most was how much these people, they're so happy, and they're always so willing to give you whatever they have and to open their hearts to you, and even if they don't know you at all. The little girls that would come up to you and they would say, I love you in Spanish, and then hug you and just stay right with you, and you didn't even know them for more than 24 hours.
It's amazing because we think, as I get it from talking with people like you, how can they be happy? Their lives are horrible. How can they be happy? That's all they know at that point, isn't it?
Yeah, when you don't know any better, you accept what you have, and they have their family, they have their religion, and they have each other, and that's what's important. And that's one thing that we lose here in our society, is how important we are to each other.
Boy, you just said a mouthful. I learn a great deal from talking with young people like you because your opinions are changed from day to day, and I'm sure your opinions about a lot of things in life, including what constitutes happiness, are a little bit different now than they were on the first day of February, right?
Yeah, when I came back, I was just amazed at how much I actually had and how much I should appreciate. Not that I should feel bad for what I have, but I just feel grateful. And when you see people who have nothing, you realize how much you really have.
It's always good to start a day with gratitude. Your lips are moving.
Well, now you know why I'm so proud of them. But I think one of the things that's important for us to say, and we talked about this with the students, it's not our fault that we're born into wealth or we're born into what we have here in the States, but we would be amiss if we didn't become more sensitive, more grateful people. And it doesn't mean you run out and give everything away, but it does mean you look at what you have with a different perspective and how you're willing to give of what you have. So you become a little less deep, you become a little less attached to the things that you have. And what Jessica said about the value of family and faith and that kind of thing, I think, is something these kids saw. It's possible. You can do it, and you can be happy. No one wishes poverty on anyone to learn this, but sometimes we have to be taken out of our comfort zones and brought to a global situation, to a country which is absolutely the poorest in Central America, to realize that, there are differences I can make in my life too.
That's great. What are any other special experiences that just stand out in your mind now? That's something that you will never ever forget.
One incident was I was working in the soup kitchen, and Holly Brady, a friend of mine, was looking for notebooks for this one family that needed notebooks to go to school, or else their children wouldn't be able to. That's the only thing that was holding them back, was they didn't have notebooks. And so I gave them my journal for this little boy to go to school, and I was just so amazed that 99 cents worth of paper was going to get this little boy to school.
Isn't that's truly amazing. Great stories. Let me move around again, take my little umbilical cord connected with Calvin and the camera. The hometown cable, we're at Seton Catholic for Mission of Hope 2. Hello. Who are you?
Adrienne Longino.
Well, what was it like for you, Adrienne?
At first, when we first got off the airplane, it was like, it didn't seem that bad. There was, it was crowded and there was some poverty, but then we just kept going further and further from the airport. And there was, like, kids on the side of the bus that were, like, reaching their arms up, begging you to give them money, or they could wash your windows to give them money, or to buy their food. And I realized, like, kids here would never have to do that because they wouldn't be resorted to that extreme to do something like that to their kids. And then when we got to the compound, I was, I was kind of nervous about what I should say to these kids to, like, see how they would like me and everything, and I didn't know what to say. But then after we unloaded all the boxes and everything, they just did everything for you. They just came up to you and talked to you. You didn't have to do anything to make them like you. It was really neat.
So you made some really important connections over there.
Mm-hmm.
What did you do for activity now? What things did you do during the week?
I went to the orphanage. I unloaded and loaded boxes. I worked in the kitchen, the soup kitchen. I translated in the clinic. Built a house, and I took pictures of kids.
You translated in the clinic?
Mm-hmm.
Are you fluent in Spanish?
No.
So this was a bit of a challenge for you? Is that what you're telling me?
Yeah, it was. I have a couple funny stories about that.
Well, tell me. We like to hear the funny stories.
Me and my friend Kristen Bowers, we were translating together because we both know a little bit of Spanish, and together we know a lot. So we were working kind of together on that, and we would tell people, like, I told this little girl that I was giving her a sticker, and in Spanish, I said biscuit instead. And
that could make a difference, you know.
And she was really confused. And Kristen, she told some lady she was putting soup in her hair when it was really soap. And that was really funny.
Was that just a matter of accent, or did she use the wrong word?
The wrong word.
Okay, so that's kind of cute. But otherwise, you were pretty deeply affected by the experience?
Yeah. It was really different. I've never experienced anything like that before.
Do you find it interesting that when you talk to your friends who went with you, that their ideas might be a little bit different from their, everybody's got a perspective of different things they saw? Have you exchanged stories a lot of times since you've been back?
Yeah, we have, but we all kind of think the same, the people who went, but when I got back, I noticed, like, the friends who didn't go, they worry about, oh, I don't like this person because I don't know, they're mean, and I don't have a dress to wear, or I don't have a shirt to wear tomorrow, and I'm just like, that doesn't really matter that much anymore to me, and it matters so much to them that, yeah, I just think differently from the people who didn't go.
Yeah.
Adrian, if she's willing, had a very, very heartwarming experience with a little girl, second day or third day after we arrived, and I was able to spend some time with Adrian after this experience, and maybe she'd be willing to share that.
I bet you she would. Moving back and forth here, tell us about it.
Okay, I was outside playing with this little girl, and we were talking for a while, and then she looked at her hand. She took off her ring. That it was the only ring she had, and she handed it to me, and then put her hands behind her back and told me she wouldn't take it back. And I begged her to take it back because I didn't want it. I thought it was really pretty, but I didn't want to take her only ring, and she wouldn't take it back. And when I said thank you and accepted it, she's like, thank you, and she gave me a big hug, and it was just really, really neat.
Oh boy, isn't that amazing? And we heard a number of stories like that last year. That things you'll never forget, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, well, I'm glad your life has changed, and I'm glad you got to do some very deep thinking based on your experience. Let's move around the table. Hello there, young man.
Merrick Chase. Probably the first emotion that I had when I got down there. It didn't really set into me till the first morning we got there. I was angry. I was angry at somebody. They gave us a welcoming ceremony, and I sat there, and they had these benches set up, and we walked in like we were better. I don't know. They kind of put us out, and I guess it was after they told me that it was like their way of honoring us and saying thank you. But I was mad. Because there's 1,500 kids in the morning, and they all stand out there, and you see them all, and they're laughing and smiling. And I was angry because I kept thinking to myself, what do they have to look forward to in life? I mean, what are their dreams? And I mean, why do they go to school if they're not?
They're out in the sun standing up, and you're sitting down. Is that what you're telling me?
Yeah, and I don't know. That was quite a big experience that hit me. I taught football most of the week.
Did you really? What was that like?
That was quite an experience. I mean, they've never seen it before. They were throwing it. We taught them how to throw it correctly. Me and my friends, and the little girls. At one point, I had like 4 or 5 little girls on my shoulders, and we were running around trying to catch bubbles.
I love it.
They love piggyback rides, and the friendliness down there it's amazing. I can't put it into words.
Yeah, some of the girls have talked about relationships back here and how important they seem to be when you're in high school here. And that's something I hear from all the high schools about the various cliques and who's better than who and who wears what to school. And boy, it's a little bit different when you get over there, isn't it?
Yeah, there's no competition among the kids like there would be up here, like sports or anything. Everybody seems to get along. I didn't even see one fight. Well, I saw 2 girls fight, I think once outside the compound. But it's amazing. I don't know. I can't put it into words.
What else did you do besides football?
I painted. I went and built a house out. That was an experience too.
Yeah, that's something I think we ought to talk about because I've had different people say we built a house. Now this isn't like a house we might have in Katyville, right?
No, it's a 10 by 12 house that we built. It's made out of tin, and there's 7 to 8 people live inside that 10 by 12 space, and we were thinking like how could they all fit in there if there were 7 to 8? They'd have to be sleeping on top of each other basically. And Adrian helped build a house too, and when we got there the first time, I didn't build a house here, but there was a family, and they didn't have any shoes on, and the little boy had the big stomach from the worms, and they were the little boy was naked, and I don't know, it brought tears to my eyes and Sister Debbie, and so we went back and we had survival kits that we made up for him. We gave him clothes and food, and
you wonder what life's going to be like for him. Like now, you've been back a couple of weeks. You wonder if what you did is still having an impact, or in 6 months, or if they're going to be back where they were.
Yeah, we didn't give them enough. I mean, we gave them what we had, but it was like cereal bars and stuff, and I guess it probably got them through like a week or 2. I also had an experience. I guess you could say it was kind of like my adopted sister. Her name was Dasha. She was a first grader, and I was playing football, and Sister Debbie called me over, and she said, "This is a little girl you're sponsoring." And I looked down, and this little girl, she had the cutest little smile on her face. She said thank you, and they bow their hands like this, and it's like a sign like they're honoring you, and that meant a lot.
Stole your heart, didn't it?
Yeah.
Huh?
Yeah, her little smile, and I met her parents later, and they kept saying thank you and gracias, and it was only $100 American, and it's putting their little girl in school.
I heard that some of the people who went there had to resist giving their money to these people because, $1 or $5 would have been just an amazing thing. Tell me a little bit about that. I just heard some stories about that.
Yeah, we had a hard time. A lot of us wanted to hand out money and food that we had, but we couldn't because if we hand out $1, then we'd have about 30 kids come, and they did get all around us, and we wouldn't have enough to hand out. We took pictures, and I think the last day we handed all of our supplies that we brought down over, like our shampoo and soap and clothes and food that we had left over. We all gave that away, and that leftover food that we didn't eat, we gave to the soup kitchen the next day, and I didn't experience the soup kitchen, but I guess that was quite an experience.
Now, did you try any of the Nicaraguan food?
Yeah, we had a lot of rice and beans. I think I lost 7 pounds when I was down there, but
Yeah, you did. Lost 7 pounds.
I could gain weight on rice and beans, no problem at all.
yeah, the cooking was great. I think one day we had to wait, and it wasn't a big deal, but yeah, there was one lady, I think it was related to Mrs. Flores and her family, and they cooked all of our food, and also we went and we visited Mrs. Flores, or Mr. and Mrs. Flores' grandmother, and she's 96 years old, and we had to go outside the compound, and it was like a mile walk, and we got there, and there's this little lady standing there, probably, I don't know, like 4'5" maybe, and she's giving us hugs, and she's saying, thank you for coming to our house, thank you, and me and John Verspa, another one of my friends, we sat down and we talked to her, and she was bringing out all of her little pets, her little guinea pigs, and she was we had no idea what she was saying, but we played along and she just had a great time. She didn't want us to leave, and we finally went back, but
That's a wonderful story. I heard a few stories myself about the people who live with chickens and animals in and out of the house, and it doesn't sound to us like it would be very sanitary, but, it's the way they live. Just one more question, and I'm going to move along. What was the weather like? Now, how can you build a house with just pieces of tin on a frame and people survive? Up here, you couldn't survive in something like that up here because of the tremendous changes in weather. Was it like 80 degrees every day there, or what was it like?
As soon as we got off the plane, we walked outside, and that was probably the biggest shock. I don't think it was much more than 80, but to us it felt like it was a good 100 degrees. But the houses we built, I think it keeps them cold in the summer, and in the rainy seasons I think it keeps them warmer because of the tin, and it keeps kind of like an insulation. But the heat was quite a shock. Even when we got back to Montreal, we got off the plane, and just the little connector piece that they have from the planes, you could feel that cold air, and I was still
I want to go back. All right, let me move around. These are great stories. See how formal this program is? Hi, who are you?
I'm Danny Akey.
Tell me a little bit about your experience, Dan.
Well, it's hard to put everything that we experienced into words because it's still like sinking in, but I think that the people down there have in a way they have more than us because of their state of being. They're just like, they're always happy, they're smiling. Like, if you talk to an American, they'll just blow you off basically. They won't even talk to you, but down there they'll stop, they'll drop whatever they're doing, they'll just talk to you for a long time,
We all remember an age, at least I do, when you could take a ride on a Sunday afternoon in your car with the windows down, around Altona or West Chazy or Moores, and you waved at everybody. I like to go camping, and in campgrounds, you have that camaraderie where you just wave at everybody and smile, and people say, what are you waving at that person for? You don't know them. Hey, that's a fellow human being. Make a connection. And that's when I like that statement. I hope our viewers will take notes today. Not that we're going to have a quiz, but when Dan says, in some ways, they have more than we have. And that's probably true. Tell me a little bit more about what you did and what memories you can come up with today.
Well, I worked on electricity and plumbing, and probably when we built the house was probably one of the things that I felt like it was the best things that we did, because we were giving someone so much more than they had, you know? It was like their houses were just garbage, really. They were just what they could find and put them together for shelter. And it was really amazing that people could live like that.
Most of these people don't have electricity and plumbing. As a matter of fact, for those of you who went over there, you were never quite sure when the water was going to be on long enough to take a complete shower, or when the lights were going to go off and they'd fire up the generators again. That's something we haven't mentioned here. I mean, even though your living conditions were better than most of them, they're certainly not as good as you enjoy back home, right?
Yeah, you can't depend on the water. Like, I was in the middle of a shower and the water shut off. And
I heard a few of those stories.
Yeah, and the electricity is not dependable either. Like I said, it'll turn off and on, just flicker, and it's not enough electricity to power certain things. Like if they had a refrigerator, sometimes they couldn't use other appliances because
if they had a refrigerator.
Yeah, no, but like in the compound.
Oh, I see what you mean.
Yeah.
And yes, Sister Debbie's going to talk again. We have to get the microphone back to you.
Well, not really. I would like Dan to share one of the things each night when we got together as students and shared. Different events turned different people's hearts. And I remember Dan sharing with the group one night, even though some of the students found the trip to the dump very, very, very difficult. For Dan, he felt very strongly that that's what changed his heart, so he may want to...
Yeah, okay, let's talk about that. Yeah, these are... I have to confess, I couldn't wait to come over here today, so I did talk to other people, mostly adults who took the trip, and several of them mentioned that trip to the dump. Tell me about that, Dan.
Yeah, in the dump, it was like one of our worst landfills. All the garbage from the whole area went there, and people lived there with their animals, and they ate right out of the garbage, and so did the animals, and they'd eat the animals, and they had houses built out of just garbage, and they had a lot of buzzards everywhere. Like seagulls in America, they'd just be like buzzards down there everywhere.
How long did you spend there?
It was only about... It couldn't have been 10 minutes, but it seemed so long because, people would look at you like we couldn't help them because we just were in the bus, but it's just we really wanted to. You know what I mean?
I imagine those 10 minutes worth of images will play out through the rest of your lifetime. We all process information in different ways, and time, as we discussed earlier today, can play some real tricks on you, but you do have a long time to process that information and to decide what you want to do with that information. It's one thing to put input into a computer, and it's another thing to get a program going to use that information. And in some ways, most of you will be able to use that to your advantage and maybe to the advantage of the rest of the world at some time in your life. Do you think it maybe made a difference in that respect about what you want to do, your relationships with other people, Dan?
Yeah, I look at people a lot different now, especially the people that went on the trip. Before, there was a lot of, little groups in school, and there still is. I mean, there always will be. We can't change that, but the people that went on the trip, it was almost as if we became our own group who accepted anybody, you know? It was just I don't know, it's hard to explain.
We are family, right? You're a good guy. I know it's hard to explain, but you have something else to add? Let me get back here, Adrian.
Someone that couldn't talk the first time.
Yes, I know. And that's her face isn't just red because she's blushing either.
Jess and we shared an experience, not together, but we did the same thing at different times, building the house. I didn't do much help building the house. I was there, and there was a lot of people there that day, so I felt more in the way. So what I had to do was sit on this cement block and keep all the kids off the backpacks so they wouldn't steal the backpacks. And that was really hard because, I mean, we were helping them, but they were stealing things from us, and that just showed like how desperate they were, that they'd do anything to get.
That's another one of the
things they
stories I
need.
heard. Turn around and a hammer would be gone, and that was a very interesting part of it. And they're just, as you said, desperate. The word is desperation.
Yeah, and there was these boys that were sitting on the block, and whenever I'd turn around, they'd get closer and closer to the bags, and they'd be feeling them, and I'd be like, no, you can't do that. And it was just really hard because I wanted to give them like everything, but I couldn't. And you did the same thing.
But have you got anything to add to that story?
It was weird that we're there helping building them a house, but yet we're still distrusting them because of their desperation and how they want like food and stuff, and they're stealing from us.
But you can't understand why, can't you?
Yeah, when you see how these people live, you really understand where they're coming from.
Wow. Okay. Your turn. I'm coming. Talk about perspective. Calvin has moved to the other end of the table, lest you think we performed some amazing magical trick here. It's your turn. Who are you?
My name is Catherine Roberts.
Catherine, you were responding with your facial expressions to almost everything everybody said. It must have been a great experience for you.
Definitely. It was emotion. It changed me emotionally and mentally. It's definitely not something I'm going to forget.
Well, tell me a few of the things that you did that were special for you.
On the first full day we were there, I went to the orphanage, and when we got there, a bunch of the sisters, once we got off the bus, they were right out there giving us hugs and greeting us and things like that. And when we got in there, this one little girl ran up to me. She jumped up and put her arms around my neck and was like, cling to me like the rest of the time. I mean, I got a hug from this girl like I knew her for years and hadn't seen her in a long time. That was, I mean, just how open they were and loving. It was really amazing.
Hey, grab that book over here. Sister wanted us to see a couple of the pictures in there. Is there something of the? Oh, the two on the right. Maybe Calvin. Is that a good place to get them, Calvin? All right. Tell me when you're ready, and we'll take a look at them. It's nice to. We'll look through some of the pictures too later after we finish interviewing the students here today.
Here's one of the pictures. This is the sisters singing the song, and this is actually the little girl that came and gave me the hug.
All right, I'll hold that up so Calvin can get a shot of that too. It's nice to go back and look at the pictures and refresh your memory.
Yeah. But I think the biggest experience that really hit me was helping to build the house.
Wait a minute, who did the pigtails?
Oh, I actually every day the little girls would come around me and do my hair and put flowers in my hair because I think they're just not used to seeing light hair, so they were just amazed to see blonde hair. So I'd get my hair done in pigtails and flowers every day. So, but like I was saying, the biggest experience for me was building the house. Like my family right now is redoing our house, and I've been complaining about my room. It's 13 by 13, and I've been complaining how small it was. But then it really hit me, like building this house 12 by 10 for a whole family of 7 or 8 has to live in this house and share it with their animals and things. That really hit me. I mean the whole week I was emotional, but the meeting that we had, that was the first night I really got very emotional. But I also went to the dump, and that was really hard. I know Danny said that was one of his best experiences, but that was really hard for me to look out the window and look at these people.
Sometimes best can be hard too. You know?
Yeah. It was really hard looking out the window, seeing these people just looking at you. You somewhat feel like you're better, like they think you're better than them, because you're on the bus. But we had to close the windows and things like that, and I think that was a really hard thing for me. So. But
you learn what the word missionary means, don't you, when you go on a trip like that? And I also I'm getting roughly the same theme that I got last year from the younger and older people who went there, and we learned, I think it's important for our viewers to think about our relationships with other people and how when you give love to somebody, when you get a hug from somebody, you don't, or give them a hug, you don't have to feel as though you're obligated to them.
Yeah.
And it's a whole different idea of relationships than we're led to believe almost from the moment we're born here.
Yeah, I think while we were down there, this is my first year at Seton, and I mean, I think I became closer to like some of the people that were down there, and a lot of the kids that I met down there. One of the little girls, I met her like the first day I was down there, and every day after school she'd find me, and she would put her arms around my waist, and she'd be there for the rest of the day, and towards the end of the week she gave me a scapular, and it was like the only piece of, I'm not going to say jewelry because it's not really jewelry, but that kind of thing that she had, and so I've been keeping that, and I have a picture. One of the girls that would do my hair every day, she gave me a picture of herself. I'm guessing it's one of the only pictures that she has of herself.
Oh, isn't she beautiful? Look at this.
And she gave it to me, and she gave me a flower with it, and she told me to wear a flower every day, to remember her. So I thought that was really sweet.
And I'm one of those people who believes that when you look at those faces and say a little prayer, that message travels the whole distance. I love your stories, Catherine. Let me move over a little bit farther here. Doesn't mean that you're farther down on the totem pole just because you're last. Who are you?
My name's Philip Maynard.
Ah, Philip. Everybody was mentioning your name before. What was different for you about this trip?
Well, when I went there, I imagined a really poor country where everyone was living in tribes, but it was totally different than I thought. It looked a little better.
You're reading too many comic books, Philip.
It looked like better than I thought, but it was like so much worse than it actually was, and it was really sad when we went down there the first day.
Tell me some more now. What did you do from the time you got there?
The first day I unloaded at the airport, and we had to spend about 5 or 6 hours there just to get our own packages and stuff.
Now, first of all, there's something I haven't mentioned before, but I want to get into this. When you got there and landed that plane, that was a long time from when you started here, much longer than you guys anticipated when you started. You want to tell me a little bit more about that so we can let people know how long it was before you got to sleep?
Oh, it was a while. We started off about, all day long until about 12. We boarded the bus. We headed over to Montreal.
12 at night.
Yeah.
12 at night. Yeah.
We must have got on the plane about 8. Not many people slept at all. The bus was really bumpy, and there's a lot of people, and it was a tight room. You really couldn't sleep anywhere. The plane, I caught an hour of sleep there, and I felt pretty good. And it was really tiring.
Then you got a little layover somewhere, or was it a long time?
Well, we got delayed leaving.
Oh, delayed leaving. That's what it was. So you didn't get to go till the next morning, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So when you got there, tell me a little bit about what a typical day was. How about, you told me you unloaded, you did that mostly the first day. Then how about the next day?
I did plumbing for 2 or 3 days. Then I did electrical with Tom Duran. I worked in the kitchen a little bit, slicing up some fruit for our meals. I helped put clothes together with Jess Recor, and Dan was there too. And that pretty much is all the stuff I did.
You had
That-
the wheelchairs.
So,
yeah.
what was that? What was that like? We got a picture there? Which one? No, we're looking at this one right here. Can Calvin get a shot of it and tell me what that's about?
Well, I was getting ready to head out to donate food and build the house, and Sister grabbed me over. She's like, I want you to be a part of this experience. And this lady that I saw, you really can't tell how bad her wheelchair is, but it was in terrible condition compared to the new one that we got her. And I learned that she had to wheel herself 3 miles just to get to work every day. And I lifted her up and I put her in the new wheelchair, and she was crying, and Sister was crying, and everyone was like so happy for her. It was like a good
crying,
experience.
don't we, huh? Yeah. Deeply moving experience.
Yeah.
How can you help? You'd have to be pretty hard-hearted not to be moved by an experience like that. And that was probably one of many times in your life when you'll have a chance to do something directly good for somebody that makes you feel good right then, and you know she was grateful.
Yeah, she was very grateful. She was giving everyone hugs and smiling and crying.
That's pretty neat. You think you'd want to go back again?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. See how quick that was? Thank you so much. Let me move back around the table here as we play our little musical chairs, and help me with my cord, folks. And we'll get back. Did anybody else think of anything while we were chatting that they'd like to add? Well, of course. Here she is again.
I was working in the soup kitchen one day, and this is a really hard experience. We fed like the first 3 or 4 classes, and then the last class came in, we had already run out of food. And so we didn't have any food to give this last class, so we thought about what we could give them, and we just started handing out Boost bars to all the kids. And this little girl who I met like the day before, she comes up to me and she told me she was hungry, and she like asked me if I could give her some food. And I just felt really helpless. Like I had no food to give her except for that Boost bar, and I just wanted to give her more, but I couldn't. And that was really hard.
That's tough. Anybody else thinking of anything else? I'm coming. Just give me a nod and I'm here.
When I was working at the dental clinic on like the second or third day, I forgot which, they were starting to come up to the window where we were working, and they were asking us for like toothbrushes and toothpaste, and we couldn't really give them out because we had to see the patients first, and so we were just saying no, I'm sorry, and we were motioning that they had to come through the line and everything. And this one like older lady came up, and she had like at least like 5 or 6 kids surrounding her, and she picked up this one little girl and started patting her head and saying something to me, and I don't speak any Spanish, so I was just telling her that I didn't understand and I had to walk away because I had to help out in the dental clinic. And I realized that she was trying to tell me that like her daughter had a fever, and I felt really bad because I just had to walk away.
Oh, boy. Oh, boy. I can understand. Uh-oh, Catherine, you're going to have to take the microphone right over there and talk into it.
Okay. One of the day that I went to bring survival packages around to houses, I think we stopped at, I think it was Oscar's great-grandmother, and there was a woman there. I'm not sure. I think she might have been deaf or what. She couldn't really talk. She'd use a lot of hand motions, and I went over to her and give her a hug because that's what we were giving, hugs like crazy, and she just started talking to me, and she wanted to bring me and show her, I think it was goats or something like that around in the back, and Oscar said I couldn't go, but then she just started talking to me, and I think saying something about she was just sad because she hasn't seen Gabby, and she held her when she was a baby or something like that. And I mean, I couldn't really understand what she was saying, but I would just, smile and nod my head, and that seemed to make her happy. But then she went inside and grabbed a photo album, and she started showing me pictures of herself when she was younger and when she had graduated and things like that. And she was just like, I think she was just so happy just that someone was sitting there listening to her and giving her the time of day. That was just really touching.
That's a great experience. You're coming back. One thing I want to mention before we go too much farther is we might give the impression inadvertently that these people are a sickly people. And actually, they're a very strong and, for the most part, healthy people, aren't they?
I would say that's very true. In some respects, we probably had dealt with a little bit more diarrhea and upset stomachs and things like that because we've become so used to having our immune system so specialized in the United States. They are a strong people and strong in many respects, physically, emotionally, and certainly spiritually. You have to get to Eve McGill because she came in shortly after. But
I saw her sneak in behind me, but
before you do, I wanted to share with you one. If I think of each of one of the 36 students that came, I think each of them had their own moments, and I had those moments with them, and I'm very grateful. But there are all kinds of stories, but one you probably haven't heard yet. One of the goals of this, there are really 2 objectives on this trip. One objective is to make sure that the students from Seton Catholic have a global poverty missionary experience, and that somehow their lives are affected so that they can affect change back here. The other objective of the mission is that you become task-oriented and you accomplish things while you're down there. And it's important that for the young people that they are able to see both of those. That's why, for example, I think in the future we have to look at perhaps more adult groups going at different times, but we need to keep both objectives for the students. But also how they look at situations in their life. And I would just like to share one concerning Philip. He shared in one of our sessions one night, Philip befriended a child with Down syndrome down there who could not go to school, who basically hung around the compound, was not, able to be educated. And Philip has a picture of him right here. And
Okay, let me just hold that up there so Calvin can get a shot right from there. Go ahead, talk about it.
well, actually, maybe Philip can say it better, but how he included this young man, and because Philip was very popular, as were all of my students with other kids down there, but Philip said, I said to those who had become my friends, if you want to be my friend, you must be his friend too. And I thought that was a very Christian approach to how to be inclusive instead of exclusive. And
It's
really,
a great lesson to learn in today's, especially in today's society.
exactly. So, I mean, there are stories after stories after stories like that with the students that came. But,
We're going
we'll
to have to
think
do.
more.
We're going to have to do more chapters. Anytime anybody has something to add, anybody before I move down and talk to Eve. Okay, Philip, you're going to have to take the microphone over there. Give it a shot.
Anyway, about Francisco, like the first day I saw him, I felt really sorry for him, and the kids weren't including him in playing sports like football, and so I got a football and I taught him how to throw and stuff, and he was getting pretty good at it. And one of the days when I just got up, he was playing a game with Erica Tobrock and some other kids, and you'd have to like hit the person's hand next to you, and he really didn't understand how to play. And every time he didn't understand, he'd like lose the game and he'd feel so bad. That was really sad. But the kid, his name's Francisco, I said already, but he was so sad. He did not understand very much. I'd ask him if we were friends. I'd say amigos, and sometimes he'd say yes, sometimes he'd say no. But it was a good experience with him. He paid attention to me and he listened really well.
That's great, and you'll never forget him, and I'm sure you learned a lot about the definition of the word compassion and empathy, two very important words in our vocabulary that sometimes we just don't think about. And yes, I'm sure, although you sometimes didn't understand how you made that bond and that connection, I'm sure at some level he'll never forget you, and I know based on what you just said, Philip, that you will never forget him. Eve McGill, how are you?
I am
We
fine.
saw you sneak in behind the cameras, and we knew you were here for a good reason. I know this experience for you was wonderful again, wasn't it?
Yes, it was. This was my third trip.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's talk about it.
Well, I think I have to back up to trip number one. When I went on that trip with Mrs. Flores after Hurricane Mitch hit, that was an experience of a lifetime, and it changed me in so many ways. When I got back and spoke to Sister Debbie, I just knew in my heart that if I had had that moving experience, that it would be a chance to share this with other people, and certainly it meant a lot that the young people from Seton could have that opportunity. On Mission of Hope 1 last year, we walked away on an emotional, turmoil, but on a high, thinking and realizing how much it had changed everyone, that we knew we had planted a seed and it was time to go back. There was a big planning process for this year, and I think we realized that our numbers maybe got a little bit too large.
Yeah.
Logistically, it was hard to move 75 people from point A to point B, and yet, as one of the coordinators, every time that phone would ring and someone else would say, I heard about the mission, I would like to be a part of it, I could not say no, because I felt all of us, were being called to do this. For me, this time around, I got sick. I don't know whether it was the food or
Yeah,
the
we
water.
talked about that a lot, but
Oh.
it's true.
Oh, my.
It was difficult for some people, and others it didn't seem to
that's right.
faze
Yeah,
them.
yeah. And for some, it only lasted a couple of days. But
You were sick on the way home.
I got hit pretty hard,
I
and
know about that,
spent
yeah.
all last week, and I'm on medications now. But so that really did take away from a lot of my experience this time around. I was not able to join in many of the activities and participate on the level that I really would like to have. But I am so proud of these kids and all the adults that
How
went.
can you help but be?
You can't, because you hear their stories and you see how their lives have been changed. For me, the spiritualness of the people is something that I hold very dear in my heart. There's
I
something
think we've
down
touched
there.
on that a few times, but I need to hear your version as everybody else's.
Yeah. I think on my very first trip, I went to Mass with Mrs. Flores, and we were sitting in that church. There was such a spiritual connection there and such an aliveness. And you are affected by the poverty, and you look around and you see that they have materialistically nothing, and yet their hearts are so full of their faith. And it came time for the Our Father, and we all reached across the pews and held hands. And there was a little child on this side of me and an elderly woman on the other side. And the grip from the child was just so soft and so tender, and the same from the elderly woman. And I just was so filled. From that moment on, there was a change in me, in my spirituality. And I came back, and I hold that very dear. I saw it the second trip. I did not see it this time around. We weren't able to participate in a Mass down there with the people. We had our own Mass separately. But just like the children here said, it's the love that you receive so freely from them. You see the smiles. Their hearts are just open to you. And that is something that's missing here in the United
They're
States.
wide open. As you say that, I just think that it's a matter of getting the heart all the way open. We protect our hearts
Oh,
for
yes.
some reason. We're told that we can't give everything up. Sometimes we don't open the door wide enough. But down there, as we've said, using different words all the way around this table, the hearts are wide open. And when we do that, of course, we're sometimes more vulnerable, but we tend to get down to what the word spirituality means when you open them that wide.
Yes, yeah. It crosses all boundaries, I guess. When you see maybe 4 and 5 generations of families coming together, and the little children seem to adore the grandparents and the great-grandparents. And again, that's something that, we've gotten away from here in the United States. Kids go maybe for months on ends without seeing their grandparents. And there, they are a daily part of their living. And so the closeness that it's like a part of you wants that so badly, you don't have it. The affection that's openly displayed, the little kids, the patting on the heads of the grandparents to the grandchildren, the little kids just openly running up to our kids and just offering those hugs. And there's just such a genuine feel to it all. You can't help but get wrapped up emotionally in it.
Everybody is in everybody else's sphere over there. Over here, sometimes we create that sphere, that bubble around ourselves, and forget how important it is to maintain the relationships with our own families. And I see we're so fortunate in our family because everybody loves each other, and we all get together and have wonderful meals and weekends and talk a lot on the telephone and communicate via email. And it kills me when families break apart. Sometimes for no good reason except that people get so caught up in themselves, they forget the relationships with their loved ones are essential.
Yeah. It's like, nursing homes are just, they're non-existent down there. You are just expected as a member of a family to care for the elders, and to be an integral part. And the children, you see, tend to the grandparents' needs, and they will go get things for them. And there's just a respect, I think, is the word that seems to be missing here in the United States that I saw there, and a genuine love.
Eve, how much other traveling have you done in your lifetime? I know this is special, obviously. You've been there 3 times, but how does it compare with other things you've seen and done?
I have not traveled extensively. In fact, that first trip was, my husband dubbed it as Pee-wee's Big Adventure because this little North Country bumpkin hadn't traveled far. I grew up in Cherubusco and Ellenburg area, and down the road from Sister Debbie, in fact, and I really have not. A couple of pleasure trips, away, and extravagant trips, and I don't think I could ever go on a cruise again after having this. I know I can't, and do something that extravagant and see the waste of food and after this experience. This is something I'm really committed to, and I hope for future trips that I can be a part of the planning process. I would really like, though, not to take up space. If it meant, someone new could have the experience, I would step back and let them, because I think it's that important. It is that life-changing and life-giving an experience. So, but in comparison, yeah, I would take this trip over any cruise.
It obviously means as much to you as almost anything you've ever done.
It is. It is one of the most important things I have ever done. I feel very blessed to have been a part of that first trip, and then to come back and have this mission, arise from it all, and to see that lives are being changed. And we've given an awful lot of hope to these people. You can see it in the welcoming ceremony.
The mission of hope.
Yeah, when they said goodbye to us, and we assured them we will be back. You can see their expressions of just, they know it. I think we are trusted friends to them now, and they know that our intentions are certainly, for their benefit. So we have every hope that continued trips will happen, and I hope I can be a part of them.
I'm sure you will be. Now you're the expert. You want to say something, Catherine? Take the mic.
It has to do with what Ms. McGill was saying about the church. I was going to go to the beach, but then I had watched the end of part of their mass during the week once, and I really wanted to go because I just wanted to experience their mass. And I was sitting in the pew, and then this large family came in. Like she was saying, it was like the grandparents, the parents, the children. It was just like the whole family all going to church at once. And so I let them, or I went and I stood up through the mass so they could sit in the pew. But it was just amazing. I didn't understand most of it, but I could follow what they were saying. But then it's amazing how much the kids are. How spiritual they are, how important their religion is to them. Even the teenagers, it was I know the teenagers are active, and some teenagers are embarrassed about their religion. I don't want to say embarrassed, but not active in their church. But the people that were playing in the band, a lot of the songs that the band would do would be hymns and things like that, and I think it was interesting. You could feel the spirituality these people had. It was really amazing.
That's wonderful. I like that. Go ahead.
Well, I just sent Kara to pick up the silk flag that the school in Nicaragua that we have sponsored as our sister school gave us the night before we left. For the sake of the sponsors and the many, many adults and individuals throughout the North Country who have supported us, we dedicated the library that Monies built last year from the North Country, and that was dedicated while the students were there, so that was really special. And in addition to that, the school presented us formally with their flag, their native flag. And my understanding from speaking to people who are Nicaraguan, that is one of the greatest honors that you can be given. So they really have basically adopted us as family. And I think about the family that Eric's family is sponsoring, and that is one of the things that they said to him was that we no longer consider you just a friend, but that we are now family. And that weaves with what Eve was saying in terms of the level of commitment and respect and dedication of relationship that they develop with people who are compassionate with them. one of the things I think we've learned is that it's not an us and them, but the goal here is that we become more one. And so we wanted to show off our beautiful flag as well, and also thank the many, many people of the North Country. During that week, just a few of the things that got accomplished. There were 2 visits to the orphanage. There were soup kitchens. In fact, monies from the North Country now keep that soup kitchen open because it had closed because funds had been shut off. We have that supplied for at least the next month and a half. Almost 900 patients seen in the medical clinic. We put in 10 toilets. They wired 4 buildings, electrically wired 4 buildings, painted 5 different rooms, set up and programmed computers for Spanish while we were there. The night after we arrived, one thing we didn't share publicly here because we didn't want parents to be worried was that one of the rooms in the school had been broken into, and all the toys and things that little kindergarten had and school supplies had been stolen, and I'm sure those would go on the black market and be sold or whatever. I was so proud of our students, Eric and Amber Kranak and Katie Hayes. They looked in, they saw the mess, and it was a mess in this room, and the teachers were discouraged. And my 3 kids, they just got in there and they started emptying that room out and helping to sort. And that was something unexpected that took an hour that we didn't plan. Those are the things that people up here need to know, So we then, again, helped to try to put more toys back into that classroom and school supplies. We talked about the painting. We talked about the electrical work. We talked about plumbing. What did I miss? Just so people know.
I want to talk more about, you and I mentioned photographs, and maybe it would be nice if we could take Polaroid photographs and show them pictures that you had taken of them before you left. Did you get a chance to do any of that? Did they get to see any of your pictures?
Thanks to you, Gordy. Yes. The North Country needs to know that Gordy followed through on his promise from the last interview and got us Polaroid film. And some people also brought their own Polaroid film. Kara did, for example, in her own camera. We had 3 or 4 Polaroid cameras and lots of Polaroid film this time. It was a real treat for the children at the orphanage. When Steve Bailey cut their hair, he gave them a picture for them. We did that in several different locations in the school. Sister Stephanie did that when she was taking group shots of the kids in the school when she went with the kids. So yes, they have lots more photos of themselves than they had prior to our going.
And let's talk about the video now. Somebody did quite a bit of video.
Mitch Willett and Angel Bracero we were very fortunate, and Mr. Flores, we were very fortunate, and Paul O'Connell, right? It's always important to remember everyone that was involved. We were very fortunate. Chris Glorioso and Channel 5 worked tremendously in getting us a camera to take with us, and our guys actually did all the footage and narrating while we were down there. So that's something we're all waiting to see the final finished product of, but that will be available at some point as well. So that was a piece that we had, and then I can't say enough about Shan Moore, and we were in contact every night. That felt really good to be in contact with somebody every night.
I heard some people say, I didn't think I was on the list to be interviewed.
Well, Mrs. McGill made the list of people to be interviewed, so if they gave her name, if they put it on the wrong list, then the adults are responsible for their own choices.
They weren't complaining.
But we tried to get everyone who wanted to be interviewed, and I thought it was important for the students especially to be first and to share in that experience. And Shan did a wonderful job. One of the nicest responses we got from parents back here was that literally people were following this every day, just like they did last year, every word and everywhere. And I learned that, like the sisters in New Hampshire from our place where I often visit, who are friends, and one of those sisters came with us, they would take the pieces of the press off the internet each day and then make that the core of their daily prayer in the morning and in the evening, and choose scripture passages that accompanied what these kids were doing. That's a very powerful link. You talk about that circle widening and that that link. And then also, I just got a phone call last week. Church groups in Champlain and Ross's Point did the same thing. And they said, how better to teach our junior high kids or our high school kids about service? So they would take the stories of these kids. These kids don't even know this yet because I haven't had a chance to tell them. And they would actually tell their stories in their religion classes and say, you know, service is real and it is possible. And so these kids were actually being used as models in various religion classes. We have dates set up to speak to confirmation classes and different organizations coming up. And Catherine's already done a presentation at Northern Adirondack. St. John's has. Kara's done a presentation down at St. Peter's already. And see, they're all doing it. I don't even know what's going on, half of it. But that's ownership, and that's sharing the responsibility as well. Because one of the things we try to say to the students is, when you have completed that piece down there, your mission doesn't end. Your mission continues here now to share that experience and to include more people in that experience. So
It's really terrific to see that. And Catherine, you all have said very important things, some of you knowing that you did and some not knowing how important the things you said were, because you felt them deeply and said that. But I liked what you said about the people being embarrassed about their religion. You didn't think that was a good word to use, but it was a word to use, because I remember my childhood. I was brought up in a very, very fundamentally religious home. And as a young child, I felt at times embarrassed by my religion. I regret that now as an adult. And I think what the lessons you people have all learned around this table are that you can share that spirituality openly, and strangely enough, most people won't ridicule you. And those people who do are very insecure themselves, and there is a lot of important lessons to learn about that. Did you want to add something to that?
I think it's not, like, they might not be so much embarrassed, but afraid that like you said, well, I'm not like they'd be ridiculed for, like, openly saying that, or like talking about their religion or professing their faith or something like that. But the thing, like, they're not afraid to. I mean, they wear, like, the crosses, they wear them, and they're proud of them. That's, I guess, what I'm talking about.
I think it's also important for our students to, I think one of the empowering things that happens on a trip like this is that they can take pieces. They don't have to be the extremist religious fanatics, or, you know, be looked at as off the wall because they value their faith or they've lived the gospel values. What's happened as a result of this is our young people have a healthy spirituality, you know, and we need to honor that. We need to recognize that. We need to give them opportunities. They're growing up in a different culture than we grew up in. They're growing up in a different faith world than we grew up in. They're peltered with a lot of more stuff than we ever were. And for them to feel healthy and happy and whole, you know, and holy, but not have to be like extremists about it. You know, they maybe don't even realize the effect that a mission like this has had on their lives totally yet. But to feel good about who they are and what they've shared, and that, you know, somehow this makes them healthier and happier, you know?
And I'm glad that we can share those experiences with other people. We've talked about the several different ways that we're getting the word out. It's important every year that we tell more and more people, even though we can't take more and more people with us on the trip every year. You know, that community of prayers, of monetary support, and other kinds of support is very important, because this story isn't finished, Eve.
Oh, no, to be continued, for sure.
This story isn't finished. We haven't even looked at all the photographs. We'll have to come back and talk with more people and get another chapter, and we'll get perhaps some more of the students and adults who went on the trip to do Chapter 2 of Mission of Hope, number 2. It's a great experience for me, because I enjoy people of all ages getting new experiences and discovering their spirituality and who they are and why they're on this hunk of mud in the first place. And who knows where we're going to be next time for our little corner.